California has seen some of its largest, deadliest, and most destructive wildfires in recent years. The ability to tackle wildfire in an era of extreme weather is an urgent problem facing not only millions of Californians, but people in fire-prone areas around the world. Joining us live today to talk about this issue is Jordan Thomas, who received a PhD at UC Santa Barbara and spent time fighting fire with the Los Padres Hotshots. He documented his experience in the book, When It All Burns, Fighting Fire in a Transformed World. Jordan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, you went from working on a cultural anthropology PhD at UCSB to the front lines of fighting wildfires in California, including the Alisal fire here on the Gaviota Coast in 2021. So what pushed you to get this firsthand experience?
You know, I started fighting fires before I began my PhD. I moved to Santa Barbara and I needed a job, and everybody started telling me about the Hotshots. So I was trying to figure out a way to get on the Hotshots because it's difficult to live so close to such an experienced group of people and to be interested in climate change and fire and what's going on out there and not be drawn to people like this.
And how did your perspective on wildfires change after working as a hotshot?
I came to appreciate how much skill and knowledge goes into being able to not just survive on the edges of these fires, but navigate them, anticipate what they're going to do, how they're going to behave. These are fires that our very best science has a difficult time comprehending and understanding. But it's the job of the hotshots to navigate these fires every single day. So I started thinking a lot about how we value people like the hotshots in terms of compensation, in terms of how we give them health care, and what this means for the sorts of resilience we can build as climate change gets worse.
Yeah, you talk about wildfires, not only an environmental and climate issue, but a labor issue as well. You mentioned it a bit there with regards to pay. It's not great for these hotshots, right? Can you explain how labor policies are important to combating extreme wildfires?
Well, yeah, it's extremely difficult to staff hotshot crews around the country now, even though hotshots are basically the special forces of wildland firefighters, and they work on federal land, and federal land comprises about half of California. So we really, really need hotshots, but it's extremely hard to keep hotshot crews fully staffed nowadays because there aren't so many people staying in the job. And that's largely because of lack of compensation, not very good health care, and the chronic health effects that come from the work, which in the long run aren't very well, you're not very well taken care of. A lot of the people on hotshot crews are seasonal contract labor. So in the off season, you don't have employment.
Let's talk a bit about controlled burns and prescribed burns, which is a part of the firefighting arsenal, if you will. And when it comes to managing these wildfires, how have these practices been suppressed in California? What have your studies on this shown you?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty widely understood in California nowadays that fire suppression was a misguided policy. A lot of the landscapes actually need certain kinds of fire to thrive, and taking away those kinds of fire really laid the conditions for what we're seeing now. Now, there's a real misplaced historical point where people think that fires started being suppressed in the early 1900s with the foundation of the United States Forest Service. But what that does is it eliminates about a century and a half of fire suppression before, because most fires before Europeans came were not just natural fires. They were being lit by California's indigenous people because they're the most important part of their environmental management mechanisms that allowed them to create food systems. So the first thing Europeans did, and then the first thing the American government did when they took over California, was criminalize indigenous use of the fire, which functionally took fire out of the majority of California's landscapes and really was the first step in the building blocks or in the path that led to these mega fires that we're experiencing today.
So where are we now with regards to the prescribed burns? What are some of the obstacles preventing California from doing more of it? And do you think that California should be doing more of it?
There's a wide consensus that there needs to be much more fire in California. It's hard to comprehend how much fire would be appropriate for California to experience, but we need to think about fire plural. Fire is not a singular thing, just like precipitation is not a singular thing. Every landscape, every ecosystem needs certain kinds of fire, or most landscapes and ecosystems do. So it's a matter of understanding your ecosystems and working with your community to figure out how you can safely put fire on the ground and what the ecosystems need. And there's really incredible initiatives, especially in Santa Barbara County, but really all over the state. If you look into prescribed burn associations, you can find groups of people who are working on this. And But again, it's just important to emphasize that we can do this at community level, at the state level, but half of California's land is federal land. And that means that the funding going to these projects are dictated by the current administration. And so federal elections actually really matter. And it's extremely ironic to see administrations like our current one complain about forest mismanagement when they're cutting funding for the people doing the management.
Jordan, we only have about 30 seconds left here. Just your last message to people, things maybe they can do to help to reduce the risk of wildfires.
Yeah, try to build a relationship with what kinds of fire exist in a healthy way in your area, in your ecosystem. Learn about that and talk to people who are trying to bring fire back.
All right, Jordan Thomas, the author of When It All Burns, joining us live here on your news channel. Thank you very much for your time today, Jordan.
Thanks so much for having me on.